Here is Coke and here is Pepsi. We've seen this before, haven't we? It harks back to 1980s when Pepsi did the Pepsi Challenge, and what they were trying to do was convince people that their type of Coke was better than the Coke. As cliched as this example is, it serves my point. I suppose in a very 2020 way, we're doing the modern take on it because these are sugar-free drinks. This is quite interesting because I wouldn't have tasted the difference between Coke and Pepsi if I hadn't done this. So this one's Coke. Kind of quite dry. And this is Pepsi. Ooh, much sweeter. So the point is, I couldn't have tested one unless I tested the other. The unique selling point of Coke is different to Pepsi, and comparing one to the other, their alternates give them their USPs. So this comparative testing is a bit like HiFi. I always use the example of a Chord Hugo TT2 DAC, comparing it to a PS Audio DirectStream DAC. Quite different sonic traits between these DACs. The Chord is incisive, it's intonated, it's dynamic and detailed. That's its USP. The PS Audio is smooth, vinyl-like, relaxed and rounded with a big soundstage. Now I actually like both equally to one another, but the Chord is my preference. That's just me. So what I'm actually effectively doing is picking out objective differences by comparison, and it relies on comparison as opposed to a review that doesn't do so. And this isn't just about two types of Coke or two types of DAC. You can extend it beyond that to all different types of products. So maybe 4 or 5 DACs or even more DACs, or 4 or 5 pairs of speakers or whatever. And the other thing too is, it's not as if I can miss the differences between these two DACs or these two Cokes, because they're fairly obvious and other reviewers will come to similar conclusions. So I actually call this objective consensus. There's consensus around what these products do. Obviously, I'm talking in a sonic sense, you'll understand. So what this boils down to, objective comparison and objective consensus, is that a hi-fi review can be objective. And what do we mean by objective? Well, objective means not being influenced by personal feelings and considering the factual differences between two components, the sonic factual differences. What that effectively means is that the differences between those two DACs I described, or these two Cokes we've just tried, is undeniable. You cannot change that. It's factual. And if you put 20 people in the room, you put 100 people in the room, you put 1,000 people in the room, they'd all say Pepsi tastes sweeter. And this is actually what I do as a review. I check all these differences for you. So I'm trying hard between these components to tell you, what is the difference? Is it Coke or is it Pepsi? One of the things that comes across with hi-fi reviews a lot is that people will just say, well, your review is subjective, it's just your opinion. But it's not, because I take out my preference. I'm describing here that the Coke is drier, the Pepsi is sweeter. That is a factual difference. I pick on a number of criteria, and I pick using those criteria based on what I think most people, includes me, will like. So that brings to the question of what are these criteria? Well, the first thing that's most obvious with hi-fi is detail resolution. That's the thing you're going to assess the most, because that's what lets you hear into the music. It lets you hear the layering of the music. It lets you hear the detail of the music. It invites you into the music better. So it's just giving you more separation, and it's just making music much more enjoyable. Another thing that's really important is the balance of bass and treble. You'll hear me referring to this in my reviews as balance, just like a balance knob on an amplifier. And there's really three main categories of balance. There's systems that are smooth with bass and have dialed down treble. There are systems that are neutral with treble and bass, and there are systems with low bass and higher treble. An overused term in hi-fi, but some people call those systems bright. And why this is actually an important consideration in a hi-fi is because neutrality is something to aim for if you've got other components that are neutral. Also, when you're adding one component to another component and they have different balance, you're more often than not going to get a blend of the sound of those two components. So that's a very important consideration in whether you buy that component or not on its balance credentials. The other thing I look at is dynamics in music. Dynamics, I think, is one of the most important parts of music. We're not talking just quiet and loud parts of a music track. So for instance, classical music where it goes loud and then it goes quiet. But also we're talking about how intonated and dynamic the music is, so how on-off it is, because that determines how real music sounds, a drum beat, a guitar. The other two criteria that I look at are soundstage, so not only the width of the soundstage, so how well the speakers image, but also their depth. And I also look at mid-range quality. Soundstage is obviously important because, let's face it, the bigger the soundstage, the more feeling of being there and having presence. And mid-range quality, well, that's obvious because most of the music is in the mid-range in most acoustic music or electronic music, and the vocal is in the mid-range. So you need that to be realistic. So once you know that reviews can be considered objective by making comparisons, and you know on what basis or what criteria those comparisons are made, taking preference out, can you use a review to understand whether you might like it or not, you might like the product or not? And therefore, is a review more than just being subjective and that it has an objective purpose? And I think you can use the review on the basis of whether you like the product or not. It's not just a subjective opinion. Obviously, your preference comes into it as to whether you like it or not, but I happen to think that the differences between what people like out of a hi-fi are actually quite narrow. It's not this kind of connoisseur pursuit where there's millions of different, ways of liking hi-fi, like there is with wine or coffee or whatever. It's just not like that. And that doesn't mean that I'm underplaying hi-fi. It's just, I'm just being a realist, I guess. So hopefully my reviews continue to have a useful purpose for you, and that you don't just think, well, I can discount a review on the basis of subjectivity and that he's just got a subjective opinion about something. Remember too that I'm listening to a lot of hi-fi kit, so I can tell you what's performing really good at a price level within your given tastes. And I'm looking at it in a balanced way. So I'm looking at the strengths of the products, I'm looking at any pitfalls as well, and ultimately giving you the choice over what you want. So once you know, I'm not looking at the camera, am I? I've got 10 minutes left. Anyway, I hope you like what I'm doing, and if you do, please hit the subscribe button. Please continue to support my channel. I'm hoping to give away some products that have been given to me to my supporters, those people who have subscribed to my channel.